Hello, everyone. Today is uh, March 3rd, 2021, and this is the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. Michael Layne from Gearbox will be presenting a web and FileMaker combo solution, and we're all excited to see that. So, Michael, if you'd like to present, you can take it
Great.
away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. You should let me know if you all can. So can you see my screen? Because I can't see anything right now.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay.
We're seeing the full screen. We're seeing
Okay.
the presentation on here. One
Great.
thing, you can press the hide button and it'll get rid of that little window that's down at the bottom.
Okay.
It says, yeah, the little box down.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking for my mouse.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
All right.
Okay, let me start that back up again. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to be here. Hello to everyone, and during COVID times. I have a few slides to go through, and I will get to demoing some of the things that we've been working on lately. So first off, for those of you who don't know, I'm Michael Layne. I'm with Gearbox Solutions, and I've been with Gearbox around 10 years, and many of you may know Marty Thomason, who started Gearbox about 20 years ago. And there's a brief little bit of information on the right. And I just had to ask, after seeing so many presentations by Vince Minano, I just had to throw it in there that I also back into parking spaces, something a habit I picked up when I was living in Australia. Actually, in Sydney, there's some places where you'll get a ticket if you don't back into a parking spot. So what I want to present on is how to get from a large, mission-critical, complex internal system to a small, lightweight, simple, client-facing web portal. And I'm going to walk through and do that. And also, for those of you who do know me and the ones who don't, I've been a FileMaker developer for a long time, but I also am firmly planted in web development as well. And I enjoy straddling those two things. So, and I'll go ahead and say now this does not involve WebDirect. And so how do we do this? This is just a walkthrough of what I'll be doing during the presentation. We're going to review a FileMaker app. We're going to look at access and how it exactly works. And I have some points on security as well. We'll review the web application itself, and then we'll dive into some code, and I'll show you how I solved some problems that I came across, that all of us probably come across when we're FileMaker developers doing web development. So, so why do we bring things to the web from FileMaker? Well, for us, a browser is easy. I think we all know that it's nice when software isn't required and installs and licenses aren't required. I mentioned security again because you're dealing with the simplicity and security of a browser. Lately, we've been doing some projects where they're completely web-based, and we're leveraging services like Auth0 and Okta. And some of that is a steep learning curve, but it's been super enlightening, and we've learned a lot. So I've learned a lot about security, and I've also relearned some things about FileMaker security. Another reason why I like to do stuff in the web is because I think when you switch gears, it promotes simplicity. FileMaker, it's really easy to get super dense on layouts and super dense with data very quickly because it's so easy to drag things into place and add portals and all kinds of objects. And the web HTML and CSS and JavaScript is just a little bit different. And for me anyway, it makes me start with kind of a less is more philosophy. Why not WebDirect? Well, I know WebDirect has come a long way, and I'm sure it's great, but I confess I have pretty much next to no experience with it whatsoever. We've done, I think, 2 WebDirect projects in the last decade, and I wasn't really involved on them. And again, this is just my view, but when it's not WebDirect, you have more control, less hack. I know there are lots of little things you have to work around, like the stacking order and certain hover things and buttons and all that. I also think it's great to work with the different technologies that are web-centric. And for me, it's all about learning new stuff and expanding your skill set.
Can I add something onto that list of
Yes,
things?
sir.
Well,
Yes.
so another reason that I really like to do non-web direct web applications is the different FileMaker licensing. So, you need to have user licenses for WebDirect or anonymous user licenses for WebDirect, which can get expensive if you have a bunch of people getting in there for small tasks in particular. Performance, I think, is another one. WebDirect can be a little bit slower. And then another thing that has been a particular pain point for me is that WebDirect does not handle responsive design very well.
Yeah, very true. I actually will certainly touch on that when I show off the web application and how easy it is to use, CSS frameworks for that. So thank you for adding that, because again, I can't really speak to WebDirect pros and cons, although I know a lot of people use it, but those are really great points, David. So I want to touch on security, because this is where I really get to have a strong appreciation for FileMaker. I think as a FileMaker developer, historically, I wasn't one of those people that thought an awful lot about security. I just trusted that it worked. They've got an entire security model with privilege sets and all kinds of access. And it's sort of apples and oranges when you're talking about other types of systems to secure. But when you bring FileMaker to the web, all of a sudden I have to really, really think about all this. So this is just a quick breakdown of the system that I'm going to show, and what little pieces that are really actually exposed. So this system has 96 data tables, and by the way, this is kind of a model view controller. We've got a UI file, we've got an API file, and then there's a data file. And the web application speaks to the API file just like the interface file. So it does not speak directly to the data file, although, as you may know, privilege sets are very important to this specific file. So we have the same privilege set name on the data file and the API file. And you've got to go to the data file and set things like field level access and layout, no, not layout access, but field level access. And on the API file, you've got to specify your layout access, even though the tables don't live in the API file. So very small percentages of things are actually exposed to the web. And I won't go through every number, but layouts, that's probably high. There might be only 12 layouts that we use. And those layouts are always sort of carved off to the side. They're not tied to any other table occurrences. They just are sort of self-contained and isolated. Also, I want to mention about scripts that, when you're not working in FileMaker, you don't think of calling a script in a database. And so because I come from also a non-FileMaker world, it just never made sense to me to run scripts, although I get the benefit and I get why you do it. I just never got in the habit of doing it. But I know a lot of people do. So I did a lot of investigation. I had to kind of get out of my own head. And I realized that in some cases, it's lovely to be able to call a script from the data API. And so I usually look at FileMaker as nothing but a data store, and I think it keeps things simple. But there are 3 scripts that are exposed to this privilege set we use. And down there, I don't know if you can see it, but below to the right, it's just login, set password, and check auth pin. So they're all about authentication. This system, we kind of rolled our own 2-factor authentication. So we have things like, device information, IP address, things like that. So if they're logging in from a device that we don't recognize, we will, and we have a valid email address, we'll email them a PIN. They can put the PIN in, and then we'll capture that next device for them. That was that was really fun to figure out, doing that in FileMaker. So those are just the 3 scripts. And then finally field level access. There are over 2,000 fields. Less than 100 are exposed. Otherwise, if you were to try to hit it, you would just see no access everywhere. And of those 100, they're all read-only, except for 3 fields in a table that allows an external user to create an activity. And that really is just, an activity is just giving it a title and a description. And while you can attach files to it, that's all handled with Amazon Web Services S3 storage. So we really don't interface with the database too much at all. Any questions about that before I move on, or any comments? I'm not a FileMaker security expert, but I know there are some on the call. So, all right. And I mentioned promote simplicity. There's just one of many quotes that I try to keep in mind, kind of a less is more, and only concentrate on what's important. And it definitely helped when you see the density of data in the FileMaker side compared to what the users see in the website. And just before I get started and showing off some things and clicking around, I just want to show that it's great to leverage some current technologies, CSS frameworks, JavaScript front-end frameworks, and back-end frameworks. This is by no means a definitive list of stacks that people are using these days. I'm just, in the FileMaker community, it seems like JavaScript is the thing that's talked about as much as anything else besides FileMaker. And so I listed some things here. For those of you who do use CSS frameworks, they're just super easy and simple to get you up and running and have things look clean and nice. I've used Bootstrap for a long time, but I've gone down the road with some other frameworks that I'm really enjoying using. Bulma is, if you haven't checked that out, it's super simple. It's unopinionated, and it's not nearly as large as Bootstrap, but you get kind of all the same thing, and you get responsive design out of the box. And I also want to mention that for those UI geeks in the group, Tailwind CSS is a front-end framework that is a utility-first CSS framework. So whereas Bootstrap tells you, hey, if you assign this class, it's going to look like this. Tailwind doesn't have any of those things. You might use one class for Bootstrap to describe how an object is going to look. But in Tailwind, you might use 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 little utility classes. So you can be really pinpoint exactly how you want something to look in terms of positioning and hover states and colors and borders and radiuses. So if you're interested in learning some really cool kind of latest and greatest CSS tricks, I'd check out Tailwind CSS. And then Gearbox, we're kind of fans of Vue. I know there's a lot of React people in the crowd, but I kind of landed on Vue, and something easy to grok. And in my experience, I've talked to a lot of FileMaker developers who also are fans of Vue. And then the only thing I can really speak to on the right side of the screen is that I've started to get into Node a lot more lately, and we have some projects that are, the back end is all Node and Express.js, and then usually it's MySQL as a database, if not FileMaker. All right, I think this is my last screen. I also just want to show that no matter what the technology stack is, there's usually a way to do it, to do something. And in this case, I've just got little example snippets of code where if you're in JavaScript, you can talk to AWS, you can reach up to a bucket and get a list of objects. You can do the same thing within FileMaker using insert from URL. Some of you are very familiar with that. And then on the right side, there's the PHP way of doing the exact same thing. And in the solution I'm going to show, we actually do all 3 of these things. And now I'm going to jump into the demo, and I don't ask questions yet. Let me switch over to FileMaker. All right, so this is a an application that manages shipments of fine art all over the world, and I'll try not to go into too much detail about anything. I just want to show you all the kind of the evolution of a shipment and what it has on the back end, because that's what we're going to be looking at in a browser. So I'm just going to select the shipment, and we're going to focus on this window for a minute. There's a lot of things going on here, so I'll try to point you to the things that matter. This is something that a coordinator or a group of coordinators will start to set up. There's lots of things that happen before a shipment actually takes place. Sometimes these things start to take shape months and months, if not years, before they actually happen, in case it's some big, installation at some big museum around the world. But the key things to point out are these players, these three boxes over to the left. We've got a shipper, an agent, and a consignee. So the shipper is usually who's shipping the artwork. The agent is who's handling it on the other end of the transaction, and the consignee is usually some museum that's receiving the piece of art. So these three things are pretty important to everyone, both internal and external. That means, internally for field ops and people that are working within the system, but also someone at this company LP Art, they're going to want to see what's going on with the shipment, and certainly the Met is going to see what's going on with it, as well as the people receiving it in Paris in this case. So before I go very quickly through these tabs, I want to point out that we've got this people portal here, and it used to just be staff, and then over time they wanted to show all the other internal people working on it as well as external. The reason it just says people, which is generic, is because because of this web application, it lists everyone that touches this shipment. So it might be an internal person or an external person. It might be a courier. It might be if a person has been assigned as a contact for the shipper here, then they're going to show up as well. The reason for that is they want to be able to have any of these people associated with the shipment get notified based on activities that happen during the shipment itself. So any of these people could theoretically have access to this web application that we're about to look at. And I'm going to dive in here. We've got Megan Young, who's a courier, and she's a courier. So if I click on the courier tab, we're going to see Megan right here. And she is, there's one schedule record for her. This is just test data anyway, so not too much to look at. But so Megan may or may not have access to this, but if someone wants to give Megan access to this, the first thing that happens is we're going to jump over to her profile, her person record, and we can see here she's got some roles. One of the roles is a web app, and she does not have that role. So if I want to give her that role, someone internally is going to have to do that. Then we verify her email address. We can send an invite from FileMaker, which uses Mailjet, and think of SendGrid or Mailgun or any of those services. This will send her an invite, and it will tell her that she's been invited to view a shipment or a trip sheet for her, and it'll ask her to set her password and all that good stuff. So I'm not going to click this, but that's what happens there. So let's get back to the shipment. So let's say Megan is now part of the shipment. We have activities, and activities are created beforehand, but these are the things that people want to track. So we can add an activity. If we choose a departure type or arrival type, then we can add a set of activities that's predetermined. It's kind of just a templated set of activities. And when I edit an activity, I can give it a name, a message. There's a note that's going to come in from someone out in the field. I can also allow a client to edit it and save it. And then as you can see right here, this is test stuff, and I've already added an image here. So this is actually pulling down from S3, this image that was associated with this activity. And then listed here, and I'm pointing this out because we'll see on the web app, I can turn users on and off. So these are the people that are going to be, they're going to receive an email notification when the activity is completed, and I'll also get the images if there are any associated with it. So I'm going to cancel that, and then I'll go quickly through some of these tabs. So because this is an air shipment, this tab says air, and we've got a flight. And in this case, I added another flight for testing. So this flight information is pretty important. So that's something that we want to show in the web application for people to review this shipment. The field ops, that's important because these are people that work for this company that are involved with the shipment. They might be picking up a courier. They might be meeting someone at Air France Cargo to walk it through customs. There's a variety of things that these people do. Then next is crates. So they have crates, and the crates have contents in them that we will look at in a moment. But another kind of cool feature that they offer now that this FileMaker can serve this up in a web app is that they've got GPS tracking devices that they can now bring to these shipments. And I'll tell you, actually, this did not exist, or at least the company wasn't doing this before COVID. But during this time, they have this concept now of virtual couriers, because people, for months and months, people haven't been able to travel with any of this artwork that's being shipped. Although there's been a lot less artwork shipped because museums have been closed and exhibitions haven't happened. Anyway, we can put a link in here to a shipment, and we can also put it at the crate level. So in this case, I've got an example of a tracker at the shipment level and then at the case level, and we'll be able to see that. Trucking is also, these are also other minor players within the shipment, because these are the companies that might go pick up a painting from a museum or a warehouse and deliver it to the airport. Notice this schedule. Every entity is going to have their own set of schedule records, and all those records are going to be exposed out to the web as well. And then I'll try to go through this quicker. Hope I'm not going too slow. But this just happens to be the contents inside these crates. So each crate has one painting, and this is the information that some people are going to want to see, so we needed to expose this on the web. Then we have a courier tab for our couriers. Again, these are just sort of fake couriers and records. And then the last thing we concern ourselves with as far as the web goes are documents. And these are files that people can drag and drop into the solution, or select something. And we've got, let's see, yeah. So we've got the share button. So I've got 2 files that are going to be exposed to the web out of all of them. And I think that's it. So let's go take a look at this shipment in a browser. When a coordinator wants to share the shipment with a client or a partner, they can either click this guy and grab this link if they want to stick it in an email, and if they wanted to open it themselves, they can just click this, and hopefully my screen, sorry. Hopefully my screen just went. Is everyone seeing a file? I'm sorry. Is everyone seeing a browser window?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So this is kind of branded so that I can do this demo. So we've got this cool company called Raven Apparel that I made up in my head. And then the subsidiaries are McLaren, Aston Martin, and Porsche. So I'm going to log in to this app, and you'll notice that I've got, so the URL sent out this shipment ID, and the person was not logged in. So we capture this so that when I do log in, I land right on the shipment. So what we're looking at is, exactly the data that we were just looking at in FileMaker. It's laid out differently. There's a lot less going on. It's everything that the viewers need and nothing they don't. And I'll just walk through a couple of things. First of all, as David mentioned, this particular application is using it's got a PHP backend. And there's a CSS framework called Bulma, and I don't think I wrote a lick of any extra classes or code in order to make the application be able to do this, where everything collapsed nicely. And most of you probably are really familiar with this, but for those who aren't, this is one of the lovely advantages of building web applications. So you notice I'm looking at it. This is how it would be viewed on a phone, which is pretty common for this solution. You'll notice as soon as I hit a certain breakpoint, we get these anchors. So I can jump down to certain areas, but it does not show if I'm looking at it on a desktop. So clicking around in here, I see I have 3 crates. I can jump to those crates, and I can see which courier is assigned to them. Here's my crate with some a tracking device attached. And for obvious reasons, we always show things in metric and imperial, so whoever's looking at this can tag back and forth to see what's going on. And then I can jump over to the contents. And hopefully some of you might be noticing how fast this is. Well, this is running locally on a VM on my machine, but the environment this is running on for production is the application server is in New York and the FileMaker database is in Virginia, and it is about as fast as this. It's super fast and super lightweight. And in case I didn't say this earlier, we're using the Data API as the data source. Let's see, let's go back to the shipment. And another thing I want to point out is this concept of the schedule. Remember when we had a number of schedule records that were tied to different entities, like a courier or a trucker. Now, if I click on this courier, this is what a courier sees when they log in. Again, there's not much going on. They just want to know who it is, where they're going, flight information, and this is the schedule. These are just a handful of schedule records because this individual Allison, she only cares about what's on her schedule. So we only show her schedule items. Then we have contact information as well as for the agent and internal. And then you'll notice that it says there are 2 crates. Now there are 3 crates on the shipment, but there are only 2 crates that are assigned to this person. Another thing that we can show really easily is, so for the list of activities, this is test data, so I've already used this a couple times, but you can see here that this activity was completed, and when it was completed, she was actually sent a notification on these 2 times. So we also log and track that, and she can see, we're just showing everything that we've sent her. So if I click on these crates, I can see that we show all the crates, but it's clear what crates are assigned to what particular courier. Let's see. Bear with me because I'm going to see the crates. All right. Yeah. Last thing is I want to show off is an activity. So if we go on an activity, all these are completed, but this is something that's kind of cool. There's a JavaScript library called FilePond. It's super easy and extensible, and it talks to all kinds of backends. And let me just look for an image to drag on here. So I'm just going to drag an image, and that just uploaded that image to S3. So now it's available. I can email this from the backend, and the file is immediately available in FileMaker as well. And of course, on a phone, you tap and grab an image from your phone or your camera and add it. And I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And I'm just going to go back here. And so that's that. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and I want to show you I'm going to open Insomnia, which is sort of like Postman, and I want to show you how we get this data back from FileMaker. So first thing I'm going to do is this is looking at the back end, and I don't want to. Hopefully, none of this is scary. There's no. I'm not going to walk through too much of this code, but I want to point out a couple things. So when we get a shipment, here's this shipment ID. When we get that shipment in our application, we have a controller, and we go and we call this method get shipment, and all it does, it's just this little bit of a method called get shipment. This is a RESTful API, so we send everything back, and we receive everything with an application/JSON header. We get our data, which is posted data, just like you would do if you, in any other way from using the Data API, and we'll look at that in a moment. And then we take that data and we pass it to our shipment model, which is get shipment. So when I go to look at this shipment model, let's see, yeah. So here's our get shipment. So we get our JSON, we decode it, and this is using a library called FMPDA. It's something that was created a few years back when the FileMaker Data API came out by Mark Denise. I've never met him personally, but we've chatted. Some of you may know him. There are a number of PHP libraries out there that are really nice in helping you get data out of the Data API without having to roll your own. And I have done that. When it first came out, I did that. And I've tested a few of them, and I always came back to this one. So it's super easy to use, and it's what we use to talk to FileMaker via the Data API. So we put together our query. So we pass an ID, and this is our request ID. So we put it in. We tell it that the ID is the ID. Then we get some roles back, and so depending on the role, we might restrict who can see what. Then we call our layout, because we all know that so far, with the exception of OData and ODBC, FileMaker it's bound to a layout. So this layout that we need to call is called REST shipment. We pass the layout name. We pass the data to a method called API find records. So we get our result back, and then we return our result back to our controller, and the controller returns it back to the client. So if we take a look at Insomnia, this is the JSON payload that we sent from the client. So we pass the shipment ID, the user ID who's logged into the system, so that we know that they can view the shipment or not. And then, as I mentioned, these roles. And what we get back is all this data. It's fast, it's great. I think everyone can agree that the Data API has been a boon for FileMaker development and web development as well. But what I want to point out, as I'll start to talk about a little later, is this concept of all these, sometimes when we have related data, we get back this table, the table occurrence name, and the double colons. And for those of you who are brand new to FileMaker, you have no idea what that is, and it would be a pain in the rear, and it is. It's a pain for pretty much every other language. And one of the things I want to show off is how we deal with that. I want to show off a couple things. So first of all, in this payload, we have our field data. Then we have lots of portal data. The portal there are several portals on this particular layout, although it's still super, super fast. Because actually, even though there's a lot of related data, nothing is calculated. Everything is stored, which helps, and that helps whether you're doing web development or pure FileMaker development, is to not use things like unsorted calculations, of course. So I'm going to jump to, so for example, we have got this flight array. So this flight is it's a portal of related flight records, and as you saw earlier, we had 2 flights on this shipment. So these are these 2 records. And because it's in a portal, we're always going to get the table name, the table occurrence, and these double colons. And whether you're presenting this data using straight PHP or straight Java or JavaScript or a templating language like Twig, it's a real pain to have to deal with this because most languages don't have field names like this. So I got really tired of it, and I tried to solve it, and I did. There are a couple different ways to solve it, but I want to show you how we did that. And I'm sure that there are ways to do this within FileMaker. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people got their JSON payload in FileMaker and they ran a script and they got rid of all the field names, and then the JSON that they returned was actually the JSON they manufacture as a script result rather than what FileMaker is going to spit back out. And there are other languages that can handle this stuff. But the nice thing is, since we have this middleware, since we have PHP in the middle, I'm going to go back to this PHP thing. And here we're back at our get shipment. So the payload that you just saw in Insomnia, I returned, we get an array, but I just got, we only got 1 record. So I just returned the first record in our array. And that's what you saw, and that's what FileMaker gives us out of the box. But instead of doing this, we do a teeny tiny bit of work in FileMaker, and we remember I said about the flight information, and we also have other related portal data like activity and party. So we take that array from the flights portal and we stick it in a variable called flights, and then we run a function that I wrote called sanitize key. So we clean up the keys for the name value pairs. And then this unset function from PHP is really just, okay, now I just want to get rid of this. I have got this array, this associative array, multi-dimensional array, and I want to get rid of this piece of it. And so we do that for flights, for activities, and for parties, and we could do it for everything. But there are reasons why we did it for these, because these are used more often. So once we do that to each one of these, we end up building our result back. And so we assign the data minus these portal rows, and of course the current table data that we still need, to the same variable response data itself, to shipment, which is the primary object we want back. And then we set other arrays. We have flights, activities, and parties. So when we do this, and we save this so that it works, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to resend this same call. Now you'll see at the top we have shipment, and inside shipment we have our field data. But if I collapse this, if I collapse shipment, we have flights, activities, and parties. And flights have no table names, nor do activities, nor do the parties. And that's a long and involved way of saying doing this makes your life later on working with web technologies a lot easier. I will also say, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm about 99% sure that OData, which is coming to a theater and Linux server near you, if it's not already there, OData, it's not like the data API exactly, but OData does not return. You do not get those table names. You just get the field names, I believe, from OData. If I'm incorrect, someone can mention that, but I'm pretty sure that is. And I played around with OData, and if I had more time, I would probably try to implement it, because we have some Linux servers set up, and it seems pretty promising. Now I want to take you to where we leverage this. So I'm going to go back to my browser, and I've been showing off this web application that's primarily written in PHP with a PHP framework. But now I'm going to I'm going to take you to something else. So here, this is a Vue application. So it's a single page application. It's pure JavaScript, and it is making calls directly to. It's making calls to an API that is also PHP based, that's talking to FileMaker. So I'm going to log in this, and you're going to see some subtle differences, but that's because it uses different technologies. This is pure JavaScript. We're using a UI framework called Vuetify, which gives you a ton of stuff for free out of the box. And it's been a nice learning curve. So we're sort of looking like we did before. I'm going to click on, what I didn't do is I'm going to backtrack and take you back here. So this is the current web app. When someone happens to, they're going to land on a shipment, but when they don't, we've got some search functionality that we provide. It's really simple and really basic, because this is all they need to see is a date and perhaps an office. So I'm going to quickly, find some records here. So, so we just did a search for first 15 days of April of last year, and we get we have 31 results back. What you're looking at here is just dropping in data tables, the very, very popular JavaScript library that allows you to take data and do all kinds of stuff with it. So we've got sorting and pagination and filtering. Just really cool, simple stuff. And I think a lot of people are using this right within FileMaker and a web viewer. And of course, you can use it right in a browser. So this is the functionality that we have working in this solution for people to be able to search. If I want to limit things to just a particular office, I can do that as well. I don't know if there's anything in Seattle this time, but yeah, nothing there. Okay, I wanted to show off that because I want to just show some differences. So in this Vue application, we've got almost the same functionality, but it looks a little different because I didn't want to spend the time to try to match things pixel for pixel. I think applications and frameworks and tools just they kind of have their own sense about them. And so I'm just using what Vuetify offers. And in the other case, since Vuetify it doesn't have data tables, but it has the exact same functionality built in just a little bit differently. So I'm just using what Vuetify provides. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to jump around to the same date range. And I'm going to leave the offices alone. I click search. Okay. I wonder why that happened. Let's try that again. Okay. I don't know why that happened, but we got our same 31 records, and I can paginate through them. I can filter. Again, it's super slick, and it didn't take me any hard, difficult coding to do this. It was just implementing features and functionality that are baked into these frameworks, whether it's Vue or whether it's Vuetify or whether it's Node or whether it's PHP. And then of course, FileMaker is the back end. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up that one shipment that I have. We're gonna look at the same shipment in Vue. So you can tell, if you look at these side by side, you can certainly see that they're different. Let me pull that other shipment up. Hopefully my screen is still, I guess everyone can see all this still. So they are not exactly the same, but you wouldn't really notice if I wasn't showing you what the differences were. Things scale a little differently, things wrap a little differently, but for the most part, we've got the same paradigm going with sort of different technologies. So let's see which one. Yeah. So the Vue, the single page application, we get the same thing. We get the everything wraps very nicely. There's some things in here that aren't in the main application because I just didn't get a chance to have full parity. But I can click on the schedule, and it's going to load. It's going to load this data just like it does in the other solution. If I look at contents, I can look at crates. You know, a little bit slightly different behavior, but the same thing. And now I'm going to bring you back to showing you why we went ahead and did the extra work of getting rid of those table names. So let me open up yet another window. I'll open up VS Code. So now this is Vue. Don't get too bogged down in all the code, but I want to show you that I've got this shipment detail view.vue file, which is exactly this file here, which is this file. And this is important. I think I wish there was a way to do this in FileMaker. For years, I wish that you could have a layout part that was global so that you could have something and reuse it in lots of different pages. And there's not really a native way to do that, or even a non-native way to do that. But in this case, when people talk about these frameworks, a lot of times you'll hear the term component. So it's a component-based framework, and the cool thing is, you see this card right here when I have my flights. Well, this shows up in at least 3 different places, but I don't want to recreate this piece of this layout, this content, and this component really 3 different times. So I use that component in multiple places, and the way that and I pass data to it, because I have this component for flights, but I might be looking at a different shipment, and obviously it's going to have different. You might have 1 flight, you might have 10 flights, and all the data is going to be different. So how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you get the data from FileMaker and feed it to wherever you want it to be in a web application? Well, in this shipment data, we import something called, and yeah, if FileMaker did this, it would be so great. We import something called a flights card. So I import this into my main Vue file. And really just the simple concepts are all I think this will get across. I import this flights card. It's a component. And when I come down here, when I load my data, I have a service where I say get the shipment. I pass the shipment ID, I get the shipment, I assign the shipment to the field data, and then right here, I assign this .flights to response.data.flights, which is the flights array I showed you in Insomnia. So this .flights gets set. When it gets set, I go up here and this is where this flight card, I just stick it inside a column, and it's right here. Let me get rid of that because of those colors. So this little bit right here is my flights card component. And you can see that I'm passing it the flights, a flight number, and an airway bill. So when I pass it this flights, now I'm going to open up that component. And we see that we get all this data automatically gets thrown to this component as what they call a prop. So I have flights, and I expect an array, and then these other things are strings. And all that dynamic data is just handled right there. I just loop through, and I show the information, and it loops through those flights, and you've got this nice clean flight number, flight departure date, flight departure time. The trucking is something that we did not do that to. So if I look at the data that I throw to the trucking card, this is what I have to do in order to show the field, because I've got to deal with these table names and double colons. And you might think I'm really harping on them, but you know, they've been a problem for web developers for a long time, and it's kind of a pain to get around. And if you didn't know FileMaker and someone gave you the data, you would really struggle as to what to do with this. And in every language that I'm familiar with, there's some different hack or syntax or extra custom function you have to do in order to deal with these field names. So we handled it in some different ways. So I have, let's see, I've walked through the FileMaker side and a web app that shows off a little bit of that FileMaker data, and also a Vue app. And I think my time is good, and I think my next slide is questions. So I think I just wrapped up, and I thank you for your time, and I hope that you all enjoyed it or learned something, or at least got a little interested in some things.
That was really good. Thank you very much for showing all of this.
There's no emojis. Clap, clap.
What was that?
I said there's no emoji, so clap, clap.
So why did you end up building this twice?
Because we had a really large project coming up, and we had decided that we were going to do full stack JavaScript, and so I took some time on the nights and the weekends just to build it out, and see how much parity I could get, and that's why I did it twice. I did it twice for myself. I did it to learn it.
It's a good way to learn things.
Yeah, I knew exactly what I wanted because I'd already built it in something else. So all I had to do was try to find that parity. So every time I had a problem, it was a small problem. I couldn't figure out how to do the flights or something, and so I had to solve that problem, and I solved the next problem, and after a while, I had two different applications that looked almost identical.
Which one is the client using?
The PHP one now, and my guess is in a year there'll be a lot more functionality, and it might be the Vue application.
So did they start out with a FileMaker database, and then you wanted to get a web view of it?
Yes, yeah, that's a good point, and it's something I've thought about a lot. So we've got some projects going on where FileMaker wasn't in the mix, and it's not currently. It's a different backend. This client had they had a long history of FileMaker. They had a solution that was 20 years old, and we went in and we spent about a year, and we threw that one out and developed a new FileMaker platform, which is that application that you saw. So yeah, that was in place for sure.
So having done both of them, did you like the? It sounds like you like the Vue better.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard at first because I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I've been using jQuery for forever, but that's not what Vue is, or React or Angular or any of that stuff. So it was definitely a learning curve, but I've learned a ton. And now, I mean, the largest project I'm working on right now is all Vue and all Node. So my skills are, they're definitely improving because they have to. But yeah, I'm enjoying it.
So the Vue app, was that using a PHP backend still, or is that going directly to the FileMaker Data API?
That's a good question. So originally, I was going directly to FileMaker. So I was doing all my querying directly from the Vue app. And then I thought, this is kind of a pain to write. Now I have to rewrite all that stuff in JavaScript. And I did it, but at some point I switched gears, and I took that. So I took the back end of the PHP app, and I made a module that was purely a RESTful API. And so that hits that same application, but I've just got another set of controllers and models for the Vue app. So that's why I can manipulate all that data before it gets back to the client. It's much easier just to call an endpoint and get the data back. And I'm still way more comfortable in PHP, so I was able to turn out that stuff in no time. Whereas in Vue, I'm like, okay, what do I do again? How do I do this? How do I do that? But on on a project I'm working on right now, the back end is MySQL. And so I still make my API calls from Vue, and they go to Node, and Node handles all the back and forth between the database. Is anyone else doing any kind of web-centric stuff that's either just loosely related or outside of FileMaker?
I've done a bunch with Laravel, with a couple front-end frameworks that stick on top of that, but also with Vue. It integrates really well with Vue.
Yeah.
So I've used that before with Tailwind.
Yeah.
So that's really nice to use for that.
We have a couple projects that are similar, the sort of established FileMaker backends, adding web portals. And they started out as desktop portals. Now we're adding phone portals. I guess one of the questions I had is sort of one of the things that you lose a little bit is that flexibility to refactor in FileMaker, where you just have freedom to change and move and rename anything whenever you want. And things get a little more brittle when you start binding web apps to that. I'm curious how much of a headache you've thought. How much of a headache do you see that to actually be in real life? And do you have any methods to overcome those challenges or handle that when you need to refactor stuff?
When you mean when things like field names or
yeah, like business rules change, or you decide to add new fields or tables, or maybe things need to be repurposed, and then you've got to sort of chase out how that's going to impact your web app. What's your current favorite way to do that?
Well, we haven't. So it's a pretty new FileMaker solution, and the data we use the party model, and we use some really robust data structures, and everything is pretty locked down in terms of field names and naming conventions. And so there hasn't, because we spent so much time thinking about that on the front end, we have spent almost no time having to worry about it doing this first phase of building these web applications that sit on top of it. But so the FileMaker solution that is running in production right now, it's a few versions behind. This is actually all in a QA environment right now. So they're going through it with clients, and they're getting people to use it, but it's not in production. And when they said, hey, we want to do this and this and this in the web application, sometimes the answer was, well, FileMaker can't support that because that doesn't exist in FileMaker. If it doesn't exist there, it can't exist in the web app. So for example, some of the ways we handle like the authentication and the setup for users to be able to access it, we had to create new fields and relationships so that we can go and look and see who has access to something. So it wasn't so much, we added a lot. And I think the bigger hurdle is we're now going to have to not retrain, but the people that are using their FileMaker system, they are now going to be introduced to managing recipients for the activities. Managing activities don't exist in the current solution. All that user profile stuff doesn't exist in the current solution. The ability to assign recipients doesn't exist. The tracker stuff doesn't exist. So thankfully, I was able to have the master of the solution, and I was building up the FileMaker side as I was building up the web application. So now the next step is we are migrating their production environment so that people can start to get used to all the other bells and whistles that support the web app. And then about 6 weeks after that, the web app will come into play, and people will be able to support it because they know what's going to the web app. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
I can comment on that a little bit. We just actually, in the last week, had a project where we had an old portal type thing which was connecting to a FileMaker backend, and the company was moving to a new database completely, and we had to remap everything from their old FileMaker database to the new FileMaker database. So like new, new tables, relationships. All the field names are all different. Thankfully, much better in the new system, because the old system was particularly crazy. So there were a couple places where the data relationships changed, and we had to edit some programming for that. Like if you had an item and you wanted to see the price, the relationship for seeing the prices for the items was a little bit different. That just required some programming changes. But some of the other tables were just straight, like pointed to the new database and changed the field name. And the way we build these usually using PHP as a backend for that, and then Vue or some other front end frameworks on top of that. The connection to FileMaker only happens once in one class in PHP, where we do the mapping between the FileMaker field names and the PHP values for that class. So when this change happened, all we had to really do was just go into those classes, and then when we're doing the mapping, we'd be like, price, okay, instead of being, some long complicated price name, it's now, we're now in this new database. We just have to point to the new table and change that FileMaker mapped value from it. So maybe in the old system it was the price, and then in the new system it's just price. We just had one string in one spot to change from the price to price, and then everywhere else where it's referenced, we're using the PHP attributes of this PHP class, and so it didn't affect anything. It also, if we do need to change something like that, where we have to change some PHP attributes through the whole system, and anywhere that it's referencing those things, the IDE is really good at recognizing attributes of PHP classes and where they change. So if you do have to make an adjustment for it, it can actually find all of the references to that attribute and update it through the whole system. So by having PHP Storm and IntelliJ, and I'm sure Visual Studio Code can do something similar as well. That's pretty good too. But having that one spot where it's mapped to the PHP classes made it really easy to handle the changes on the FileMaker side, because it's just that one place where you make the change, and now it's mapped correctly, which is really good. This also handles the colons really well that way too, because you only have one spot where you have to deal with that. And in this case, the way we had put it in is just a string. So it was no big deal, even because we did have some that were pulling from related records. Dealing with that wasn't much to deal with either, because you get it taken care of there in that one spot, just where you're calling those, and reading those values from the FileMaker data directly. And then that's just standard PHP and whatever JavaScript framework from there on out.
So I'm not the only person that's noticed that whole double colon thing?
I mean, it hasn't been an issue for me, because like the way we've done it is we just do the one mapping, and then we don't use that syntax anymore. So for in this case, there was something like main price, and it was being pulled from a related table. But in our system, we were just keeping track of the one price. So we mapped this related main price to just the price attribute, and we never dealt with it again. Never dealt with colons or anything like that.
So one of the projects we're working on, we're at an interesting, I guess, sort of evolution point. We started out with an established FileMaker solution, and then there was a customer portal basically built, so customers could request work or review work in the portal. And so that's been around for a long time. That was actually connected to the old CWP API, but same deal with the layout-based access, like it's always been. And then as we've been retooling to build basically a different portal, because they use a lot of 1099 contractors, we're actually kind of going in a different direction, and we're making all of our connections to the back office through script responses. So instead of accessing the layouts and relationships, we're just having scripts, just like you did for your login authentication, for each of the key sort of access points. And then we're returning everything as JSON, which seems to have some advantages in that we're not brittle anymore because we define the labels of the fields when we compose the JSON, and then all the fields are dynamically referenced again. So that's been interesting. The other thing that we're moving to that I'm not sure if it's a good idea yet, we'll wait and see if I regret it in a couple months, but we're actually starting to make a lot of our entities, we're creating a field, an unstored calculation that is basically like event as API JSON calc. So it is a calculation defined in the table of what data we plan to expose through the JSON for that entity. So it's computed on the fly whenever the record is retrieved. And that data can actually include arrays using the while function to retrieve related records through the graph. So we're actually building up the JSON in the schema, and then we just have that one field that basically gets thrown into a script result, which has been, it feels really kind of sexy right now, but we'll see how that goes. But it's been kind of interesting because we're, the one main benefit is that we're going to get away from any sort of like layout-based security model. And we can kind of switch between any of the APIs or go straight to OData without really any sort of significant changes, because it's just going to be a script we call no matter what. And it's always going to be the same payload that comes back. So I'm curious if you've thought about going that direction, or pros or cons for like the project you're working on for something.
You know, you're yet again, I'm hearing people that are being really smart about using scripts to get around things, and it didn't occur to me until you were speaking that that's exactly what we're doing with the login script and the set password, where I'm not getting, you know, it doesn't matter what layout I go to because it's running a script, and what we get back is that we just set the script result to a bunch of JSON. So we ignore all that other stuff, and I can say exactly what those labels are, and you can put whatever you want. And so that seems, you know, that seems really smart to me. I don't worry about it as much right now because the projects that I'm actually, like, I'm working on a few different projects, but the big ones I'm working on, there's no FileMaker, which is weird. I mean, the other day, last week, I went like 4 days and I had to open up FileMaker to do something, and I realized that FileMaker wasn't open, my VM wasn't open, FileMaker server. I thought, whoa, what's going on? So it's sort of a breath of fresh air not to have to worry about some of those problems. But with regard to setting stuff with scripts, I mean, that makes a lot of sense as long as it's not too much work. If you can compile all your stuff together and package it up exactly the way you want it in one script, that's awesome. You know, it kind of reminds me of, so I'm using an ORM for MySQL and Node called SQLize, and it's pretty popular, but I don't know if anyone's ever used it. And so I mean, I've never used it before. So if I make a call to get an organization, I can find that organization by ID and I can get it back. But you know how there's, and David, you'll be familiar with this, but a lot of ORMs like Eloquent and Laravel, you know, you got this has many, belongs to, has one, all these wonderful, elegant ways to just go and grab a bunch of other stuff just because of this one phrase. And that's what this ORM does. And so if I want to add something to the query, I can kind of say include, oh, and go look at that model. And these are the things I want from that model. And it just magically sends everything back. And it kind of sounds like what Chris, what you're doing with the way you're building your JSON.
Well, yeah, there is some similarity. I guess the drawback that I'm picturing right now is essentially I'm defining those relationships that has many or whatever with the relationship graph, and then I'm labeling the JSON in a in a field calculation, basically. So I think, where that might fall apart is if there's too many people or the solution is too in flux to be actually doing development work in the defined database or managed database.
Yeah.
Because that's a little bit of a choke point compared to layouts or scripts if it's a larger solution. So for this solution, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But I guess I could see that sort of being there's a reluctancy, especially with larger systems or doing anything live, to spend much time in managed database. I guess from the risk involved being in there.
Yeah.
I've seen other people implement things like that just for use in general scripts and layouts in FileMaker. I don't know what their experiences have been like long term, but I've definitely heard of that as the solution for accessing data before.
Thanks, Michael. I need to go, but
good seeing you, man.
Yeah, talk soon.
All right, take care, Tim. Is anyone else doing anything with OData, or played with it?
There was a really great presentation, I think, Steve.
From Beeswax?
I'm not totally sure, but he did a great presentation on OData.
Was it about 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a guy from Beeswax, and I saw it, and the next day I spent about an hour and I got a bunch of OData stuff working based on watching him. So yeah, I haven't done anything since, but I agree it was, and you can probably go back and watch it, right? It's probably somewhere.
Probably. Hopefully.
Yeah, it was Steve, and it's recorded.
Okay, thank you.
I recently started building a system with FM Better Forms, and it does use scripts exclusively for everything it does in the file. So everything is attached to a hook that goes back to a script that you create, and you do whatever you need to do, and you return JSON that way.
Yeah, I've worked with solutions like that too, where you don't edit the data directly in FileMaker, or sorry, you don't edit the FileMaker data directly from your web application. You just send whatever data you need to a script, right. And that's the only access that you've got, and then that does all the manipulation for you, and you work on the rest of the data modification that you need to do in FileMaker. It does kind of add a layer of protection on there, depending on who you're exposing things to. It's kind of like you're building your own little API for your application that these outside web applications can use to get in and do things, but you have control inside FileMaker. Another really big advantage of doing things like that is if you have a similar process like submitting an order that you're going to do in FileMaker and you also want to do it on the web, if you try to separately build that process on the web, you might miss something or make a mistake, or when you update it, you forget to update the web application. But if you do that action through your FileMaker script call, your web application and your FileMaker application will always be doing exactly the same thing as long as you're calling that same script.
If I'm not mistaken, Better Forms, I think that's all, he uses Vue for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different pieces of FM Better Forms. It's a crazy product. But yes, Vue is part of the front end.
Oh, it's part of it, okay.
Yep. Yeah, so there's, like I have a cheat sheet here that shows how I can, if I'm writing my own HTML, I can iterate through an array in a JSON object and, repeat, rows or whatever it is that I'm building.
If someone wants to experiment with some of this stuff with Vue, it can be a little difficult to get going on a standalone application for tests because you kind of have to compile your JavaScript for that, and get a whole bunch of libraries and things involved and using the right tools to build your application. But there's another library called Alpine.js, which is designed to be very similar to Vue. It can't do as much, but the advantage is that it's really lightweight, and it's just like you drop one little JavaScript library in your header, and it'll do very similar things to Vue. And it's modeled after Vue, and so it uses the same V if type commands.
Yeah. All that data binding stuff.
Yep, it's all the same kind of thing, but it's just it's smaller and lighter. And if you wanted to just like make one little small thing that uses some of those commands without having to like build a Vue app, it's a really good way to drop something in on a page. And it works well with Michael if you're using Laravel things. It's built by the guy who did Livewire, and it's designed for interaction with that, which is it's kind of like Livewire. I've found to be kind of like Wicket for JSP. If anyone's ever used anything like that, but yeah, that's a cool, easy way to check into the Vue kind of interaction with a web application. So
also, when it comes to Vue, there's a lot of people use Vue CLI, and it's great, but it's kind of a big, heavy thing that I've found. And I've learned my way around it. Now I'm really comfortable with it. But there's Vue CLI, there's Webpack, there's Gulp, there's all these build tools out there. And when some of them were kind of daunting, and I wanted to get some traction and teach myself some things, and I stumbled upon one called Parcel. It's super lightweight, zero configuration. So if you have Vue files, JavaScript files, HTML, whatever you have, you can run Parcel, and it builds way faster than those other things. Now, because of some of the things I am doing, there are reasons why I'm using the Vue CLI. But to your point about even that is being lightweight, but Parcel is, if I could use Parcel, I would, because it's much easier to get your head around. It's super simple. There's hardly anything to do, no configuration. It just, you do something, you save it, and Parcel does it, and you look and your browser's updated. And Vue CLI and Webpack and Gulp, and they all do that too. But and also there's another framework I hear a lot of people talking about called Svelte, and it's apparently a little bit, it's apparently a little like Vue or React as well. But, yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that was some really cool stuff. Thanks for showing all that off, Michael.
Sure.
That application.
I was happy to, and it's nice to see people. And Chris, hello, and Jason, man, I see your name all the time. It's so nice to put a face with a name.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, this group we titled the Atlanta FileMaker Developers, but everyone is welcome here. I mean, we're not doing meetings in person anyway, so
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm seeing people are on so many different meetups now, and people are watching. And didn't San Diego and Orange County just merged or something like that? Yeah, it's crazy how things have shifted.
Yep. But yeah, invite anyone else who wants to see things here. We're looking for a topic for our next month's meeting. So if anyone has anything that they'd like to present or any ideas about things that they'd like to see, send me an email, david@bluefeathergroup.com, and we can either get you scheduled if you want to present something, or try to find someone who is interested in presenting on a topic that you want to hear more about. Let me know. We're always looking for people.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks again for your all's time. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.